Okay, I want to talk about four different types of markets that economists and firms look at or are part of. So, if you're a firm, you're pretty much part of one of four different types of markets, although they can vary. And if you are an economist, you know the behavior of these firms differs depending on the type of market because the firm has different aspects to it that create different behavior patterns. So, the first one we learn about, and the one that's most pure, is called perfect competition or a perfectly competitive market. This is not really always possible under our circumstances, but this is how a perfect economy should work without outside influences. So let's look at what that means and let's look at how that's graphed. And then as we go through the different types of markets, there are four of them. You can see the differences between perfectly competitive firms and monopolies and how we graph and sort of figure out their behavior. So the first thing is in a perfectly competitive firm, a perfectly competitive market, it's a market that has an almost unlimited number of firms. That doesn't mean it actually is unlimited, but it just hundreds of thousands of firms. Think some of the perfectly competitive firms and perfectly competitive markets tend to be agriculture markets. Corn, okay? Corn. There are tons of corn producers. They make tons of corn. And when you bite into a corn on the cob, you don't know if it was made in Nebraska or Illinois or Kentucky or South Dakota, all right? Now, there's sweet corn, there's different types of corn, but like in that one corn market, there's basically an unlimited amount. Beef. When you bite into a steak or a hamburger, you can't be like, this is Jones Farm, right? You don't know where it came from. And now you might get locally sourced stuff, but in the end, the beef is beef is beef is beef, okay? And the owner of that firm has no control over the price. So if you're a farmer, you know that the price of beef or the price of corn, the price of wheat, the price of soybeans, it's not determined by you. You are getting money based on the market price. So you can see the goods tend to be the same, they're homogenous. Otherwise, it'd be a different market, right? It'd be a market for sweet corn. If it was tomatoes, you have tomatoes, but you might have like cherry tomatoes. It's a different market, right? But you have a gigantic amount of producers. And so the price actually comes from the market. The market supply and demand determines the price. And that firm, that individual firm, takes the price the market gives. So I've got plenty of kids that have cattle, and when they want to sell cattle, they take their cattle to market and they sell it and they weigh the cattle however much it weighs times the price of the market. That's what they get. An individual farmer doesn't get to go in when everybody else is getting $2 a pound and say, I'd like $17.50 a pound. They wouldn't get anything, right? So the farmer controls none of the price. The market determines the price. So we call those firms price takers, right? They have to take the price given to them by the market. They don't have control over their own price. The firm's demand curve is elastic. It's perfectly elastic because if you'll recall, perfect elasticity can happen if we have an unlimited amount of substitutes, which is what we have in this case, okay? And lastly, it's very, very easy to enter or leave the market. If you're a corn farmer and you decide you want to have soybeans instead, you're entering that market pretty easily, right? If you want to farm and you have some capital, you can buy some land and you can start farming. I'm not saying it's easy to do. I'm just saying it's easier to enter that market than any other type of market, okay? So here would be a basic market supply and demand curve, which you're familiar with, right? So you have a downward sloping demand curve, an upward sloping supply curve. They meet at equilibrium. P sub M, we're going to call that the market price, and then the market quantity. But here we're also going to have a firm's graph, okay? So where does the firm get its price? Where is the price? Well, I just told you the firm's price comes from the market. So actually the price is going to come from the market. This is going to be the price actually and the demand curve for firms and people's demand for their goods and services. Okay, here's the marginal cost, which for the firm would be like its supply. And then where that supply hits that demand curve, here's going to be the quantity for the firm, or Q sub F. So this is how much they're going to produce, and the price comes from the price in the market. The reason the demand is horizontal is because you are supplying the same type of good that has the same type of substitutable good as everybody else is, so the demand for your good is completely elastic. Now the good part about it is you can sell all you want at this price. For example, if you have cattle, they're not going to say at the market, well, I'll just take 2 of your cows, right? You bring in all the cattle you have and you sell all of that cattle at the price you've been given. If you're making corn, if you're a corn farmer and you got a couple thousand acres of corn and you've got just tons and tons of bushels of corn and you take it to market, you can sell all of that at the market for that market price. Therefore, the demand for your product is completely elastic and the price is taken from the market, so they are the same. Now you might say, well, why would a firm enter or leave the market? Well, if firms are experiencing, I'm not going to get into it too much, this average total cost and stuff, but if firms are entering the market, if there's a profit to be made, if firms are making a profit, then more firms will enter the market. And as more firms enter the market, right, that's an increase in the supply of firms, which increases our quantity, and it decreases our price, which means there's a new lower price for that firm. So that firm's actually going to be making less because other people are making more. Well, if that happens and there are more firms out there and the price goes down, then firms will start experiencing a loss because they are not getting the price that they'd like to. And the price is lowered because there's so many more people in the market. Well, if that happens, that means people will leave the market. And if people leave the market, the supply goes back this way and the price kind of goes back and forth until it finds an equilibrium. Same thing with demand, right? If there's a huge demand for corn or demand for beef, that will change the price and that will determine if people are coming into or out of the market. Again, it's easier to enter that market. So all of those increases in demand and supply and shifts in supply and demand are changing the everyday price. And you can actually go online and look at today's price of corn, today's price of wheat, of barley, of beef, of pork, of chicken, any of, right? All of those commodities change all the time based on the supply and demand of the market. And the people who are the individual firms get their price from that market. Okay, no outside influence. Now in the real life, there is outside influence. But this is how these markets are supposed to work, okay? And they tend to just be agricultural products because those tend to be the only types of products that are almost all homogeneous and have an unlimited amount of firms in the market. So this is perfectly competitive perfectly competitive market. Perfectly competitive firms get their prices from the market. The market price is determined by supply and demand, which is always moving, right? And these firms, because they get their price from the market, are called price takers. And again, because it's 100% substitutable, because there's so many substitutes, because the goods are homogeneous, then the demand curve for that firm is elastic. All right.